So why are you here? I don't mean physically here. Why are you even part of this conversation on Zoom? Why are you part of it tonight? Did someone make you? You'd feel guilty if you didn't? Or maybe it's just tradition. Just wouldn't be Christmas without Christmas Eve. Whatever you imagine your reason to be, allow me to suggest that you're wrong. That you're here for an altogether different reason. One you probably don't even know. And let me get at it the following way. Almost 20 years ago, I walked the last half of the Camino de Santiago, a 900-kilometer-long pilgrimage route which starts in southern France, crosses the Pyrenees Mountains, works its way across northern Spain, and ends in the city of Compostela, where, legend has it, the body of St. James, the brother of Jesus, is buried. Now, I went on the pilgrimage for many reasons, one of which was to have time to examine my life and my calling and how I was spending the both, and maybe find some answers to some hard questions or possible solutions to some complex problems. However, one of the things I found in that walking journey was that I really didn't have much time or energy to spend on profound issues and deep questionings, because I was more concerned with and focused on immediate and urgent questions and issues, such as, why do my blisters still hurt? Where did I put the aspirin? Should I stop for coffee now or later? How far to the next bathroom? Why does the pack feel so heavy this morning? Should I leave on or take off my poncho? Will the rain turn to snow? Do I have the strength or the will to walk another 5 or 10 clicks today before calling it a day? In other words, my day was consumed with little things, with the little things of real life on the road. After I came back from my pilgrimage, I understood a bit more clearly what a theologian I had read earlier meant when he said that most of us live episodic lives. That is, each day is a kind of isolated episode or event which has little or no connection to yesterday or tomorrow. Instead, each and every day is an episode, a one-day story that we simply try and get through by dealing with that day's concerns and little else. Another way of explaining this concept is to describe how I imagined my father viewed the world and life when he was suffering from Alzheimer's. See, the way I understood his disease was to imagine that he was watching a slideshow or a PowerPoint presentation, and as each slide or photo appeared on the screen, he would enjoy the sight of it thoroughly, even though for him it had no relationship whatsoever to what came before it or what would come after it. In other words, he was able to enjoy living completely in the present, but only because he had no memory of the past and no thought of or expectations about the future. We could say that he was locked into the present or lost in the present. And that sense of being totally immersed in the present is, I think, what this theologian meant by his phrase, episodic living. Like my dad, we become so focused on and consumed by each day or each moment in the day that we become increasingly distant or separated or disconnected from anything larger, more important, more sweeping. And that sense of being isolated or on our own is perhaps even more profound these days in the pandemic, where we are constantly connected online or by whatever and whomever we are in touch with that day. And we are concerned, perhaps even a little terrified, of being disconnected, not just for today, but for any length of time at all today. In addition, along with that loss of connection to something beyond or outside of ourselves in our phones, comes the haunting or dreadful sense that life itself may not have any real meaning or purpose beyond what we are experiencing in that moment. That life has no real direction or goal, but rather simply is. That it is something to enjoy or put up with or just get through. Now, while many of us might think that such a way of life in this digital world is normal, we ought to know that episodic living, day-to-day living, is pretty much a North American, Western European phenomenon. Indeed, most people in the rest of the world, and certainly most religious people in the world, don't look at life in that way at all. For example, Islam teaches that what happens to us in this life is the will of Allah, the immutable and unchangeable will of God. And so whether it seems good or bad to us is unimportant. Allah, which is the Arabic name for God, Allah has determined the course and events of our lives. And so for Muslims, life has cosmic meaning and purpose, even if we cannot see it, because it is choreographed, shaped, and determined by the will of God. Similarly, people who believe in reincarnation, Buddhists and Hindus among them, subscribe to the doctrine of karma, the teaching that our deeds in this life have eternal significance. And so, just as what we did in a past life has influenced our present life and state, so what we do in this life, in this incarnation, has significant influence on what will happen to us in our next incarnation. Even Christians in the West, up until about 200 or 300 years ago, thought of themselves as pilgrims on the road to heaven, which meant that life on this earth was neither the end nor was it everything, because there was more to come in the future. And it was that conviction and that commitment to the future which enabled them to begin building cathedrals that would take hundreds of years to complete. See, they didn't need to know how or when the construction would all end or what the finished product would look like when it was done. All they needed to know and to believe was that what they did in the here and now would make a difference to those who would come after them, even generations or centuries later. Now, in an increasingly secular, non-religious, digitally run world like ours, such future-oriented thinking no longer holds much sway, which means that by default, we end up focusing our attention and efforts on what we euphemistically call living in the present, or being in the moment, which can be another way, or a nice way of saying that we no longer have any real connection to or hope for the future. And what that means, I think, is that if neither the past nor the future really matters anymore, then what has to matter is today, and the stuff of today, living for today. I suspect that you can see how that all-consuming focus on day-to-day stuff was not only a real part of life on the Camino, but it's also a very real part of life here on the Sunshine Coast, or wherever it is that you live out your days. The difference, however, that made episodic living tolerable there, and even fulfilling and gratifying, was the fact that somewhere along the road, an opportunity would present itself to me to step through the doors of an old church that was 800 or 1,000 or 1,200 years old, or to cross a Roman bridge or walk a stretch of Roman road that had been there for 2,000 years or even longer. And every time, or almost every time, such an occasion took place, it was as if I was somehow transported out of my humdrum life of backpacks and blisters and bathroom breaks into a larger world, into a bigger picture, into the sense that I was part of something much greater and grander, something much more ancient and lasting, and therefore much, much more important. And of course I was part of something bigger. I wasn't simply on my own, walking by myself, a solitary, isolated, footsore pilgrim. Instead, I was traveling with, or a member of, a long and sometimes glorious, but more often bedraggled company of pilgrims from France or Spain, from Britain or Germany, who were walking this road at the same time I was, or who were countless pilgrims who had walked this road before me, who had crossed this bridge before me, who had wept and wondered and prayed and doubted before me. And it was at those aha moments, those moments of sudden awareness, that I realized I was connected to or plugged into a larger, more encompassing age-old story. A story that had unfolded for hundreds of years before I came on the scene, and would go on unfolding long after I had turned to dust. And even more exciting was that once in a while, I caught a glimpse of the mystery at the heart of life. The mystery that my insignificant grain of sand, speck in the cosmos life, was not all that there was to me. Nor was this little episode of daily living known as my day all that there was to my life, or to life. To put it another way, while it's true that I am merely one small piece of a cosmic jigsaw puzzle, and maybe I am not or will not be permitted to see how it will all fit together, or to know the pattern it will follow, or understand the form it will take, nevertheless, what I learned or grasped, however feebly, on that pilgrim's path was this truth: that there is someone who does see, does know, does understand. That there's someone putting all these little pieces together, including mine and yours and others, which means that our being there in that puzzle makes a difference as to how it will look in the end. Because without us, the puzzle isn't complete, and with us, it is. Which means that we matter. We matter because we're part of the whole. Anyway, that's a long way round to the point I was trying to make at the beginning, which is that none of us is here tonight simply because we or someone else thought it would be a good idea. Instead, I believe that deep down inside us, we are here because we long to be reminded again, need to be reminded again, that our time out there, our days out there, those little episodes of daily living that we call life, that our lives out there have value and meaning and purpose. And I'm here tonight to tell you that I am convinced that we find our life's meaning and purpose in this story we heard earlier from St. Luke chapter 2. You see, we're part of this story. And we're part of it because of our connection to those hundreds of millions of people down through the ages who have listened to that same story being read. Whether in a magnificent cathedral in Spain in 1200, or a candlelit stone monastery in Ireland in 400, or a dungeon in the Colosseum in Rome in 80, or a hiding place in the Soviet Union in 1940, in a basement or a kitchen in China last year, or at the bedside of someone dying this very night in a home or hospital not far from this place. We are all part of this story. A story that, no matter how familiar, somehow catches us up and transports us out of our little episodic lives into what that same theologian called a meta-narrative. That is, into the overarching narrative of history, into the big story. Indeed, the biggest story in all of history. The story of how the Divine One became human, so that humans can become divine. The story of how the Holy One chooses the path of humility so that humility now becomes the path to holiness. The story of how an age-old promise to mend and heal and restore the whole creation is fulfilled in the most unexpected of ways and in the most unexpected of people. In a brand new tiny person, no bigger than a loaf of bread, laid in a stone manger filled with straw. We are part of and players in that story. Like links in a chain which has its beginning in the heart of the one who has no beginning. A chain that binds Sarah and Abraham and their offspring to Moses and Miriam and the children of Israel, and then pulls in David and Bathsheba, Isaiah and the prophets along with it, and joins them to Jesus and his disciples, to Galileo and Copernicus, to Dickens and Donne, to Schweitzer and Martin Luther King Jr., and us. And without stopping at us, stretches into the future, linking us and all those before us to all those who 1,000 years from now will gather together on a holy night in December on a sealed dome on the surface of Mars, and opening the scriptures will read the simple story we heard earlier of shepherds and angels and a mother and child. I think that's why we're here tonight, in the hope, whether unknown or unspoken, that in listening to this story once more, that our hearts will be captured once more by the promise of this child. The promise that your life and mine and this baby's and God's are inextricably, intimately, and eternally connected. The promise that because of the birth of this holy child, that we will never be alone, never left alone, by ourselves or on our own, but will, for now and for always, be with him, and that he will, for now and for always, be with us, because his name is, for now and for always, Emmanuel, which means God is with us. God is with us. And now, Merry Christmas, and may you have a buen camino, a good journey.